Good evening. So, already there, I think you had many economic survey classes, right? So, initial classes, most of the classes are done, right? So, today we will, you know, what are the topics? There are three topics. One is infrastructure. There's another topic called growth, okay? And there is another topic called industry. There are three topics altogether. And primarily these are basically related to mains. There were some prelims questions. So what we will do is, we will first three slides we will see what is that we have to learn from economic survey, okay, especially um, other than data. So other than data, what is that we have to focus on? Okay, so for prelims, what should be the approach? Well, just take 2 minutes. So for prelims, three things. One, so why are we reading economic survey? Why are we collecting data? Or who publishes economic survey? And all that, I think it has been already done. Okay, so first thing, when I take up this book, I should be looking into linking it with UPSC syllabus. So which topic falls where? That is the first thing, right? Second is trend-based questions I should pick up for prelims. So when I say trend-based questions, primarily you will find trend-based questions where? So one is agriculture, okay, where you find trend-based questions. Second is growth patterns. Then contribution of sectors to GDP. Contribution of sectors to GDP, industrial growth rate, was it continuously increasing last 3 years, 4 years? Okay, so, and in industry, what is growing, what is not growing, which entity is contributing to maximum employment? Okay, so these are the areas, these are some trends which you have to check whenever you pick up the economic survey. Okay, then linking it to two important factors. Every chapter, including the chapter which we do today, you have to link it to two important things. One, focus on economic growth and inclusive growth. If you look at mains papers, there will be 3 or 4 questions purely related to growth and inclusive growth. That means if I talk about industry, so what is the role of industry in terms of enhancing economic growth? What is the role of industry in terms of enhancing inclusiveness or inclusive growth? So this should be the approach. So for example, you're talking about textile. Today we'll see there are different sectors: steel industry, textiles. So textiles, currently textiles, there is a lot of dynamics in textiles. Why? Because Bangladesh is not okay. So probably India might have some opportunity in terms of grabbing that market. So textile, what is a technical textile? So that is in news. So these are the things which you'll look into, and primarily you have to link it to growth and inclusiveness. Any topic to be linked to growth, inclusive growth, right? Then sectors and their contribution. So this is some area where economic survey is going to be very, very helpful, mains as well as prelims. Then different schemes in news. So probably in our material also, whenever we are explaining a topic, on the other side, you will find there are some schemes related to the topic. And these schemes, if not all, at least 3 schemes, 2 schemes related to that particular topic has to be looked into. Then new terms and relevance. Any new word that has come up and which has been used by maybe the finance minister or maybe RBI governor again and again, and that term is coming again and again in the economic survey or in news, then that becomes important for prelims. I think it is clear. So this is for the prelims, this is the approach. Okay, then mains, the first part remains the same, linking with the syllabus. Then growth and inclusive growth, that also remains same. Third, data chart, very important. So when I say what is that I pick up from economic survey? I pick up data chart. What is a data chart? For writing answers, I require some data. For example, what is the contribution of MSME to GDP? Okay, so if you have read the chapter, 30%, right? So what is the contribution of MSME to exports this 2024? It is around 45%. Okay, so like this, these are called as data points. So I will be able to get some data points for writing mains. That is another important area from economic survey. Okay, so then value addition for grabbing 1 additional mark per question. This I mean by graphs. So what I mean is block diagrams, Venn diagrams, etc., or maybe the line graphs which you see when you read the chapter. So these are for value addition. Okay, so then updating my mains notes using economic survey. So already if you have prepared notes, okay, if you have prepared, if not prepared, it's okay. So if you have already prepared notes or if there's a class notes, okay, so that notes has to be updated with recent data which you see in the economic survey. So I have to do that, otherwise no point in writing, reading this text, right? So then relevance with previous policies of the government. Okay, what is this relevance with previous policies of government? For example, if I talk about Viksit Bharat 2047, right? And in 2018-19, I'll show you one picture. So there was this economic survey talking about $5 trillion. Okay, here you have 7 priorities for Viksit Bharat. Okay, and there you have a geared approach for $5 trillion. Okay, so I'll talk about both, we'll see. And is there any match? And is there anything that has been excluded by the government? Or these are the things. This is something like a comparison. This shows a policy change of the government. For example, government was talking about investment-led driven growth, focusing on exports. So primarily, if you are reading the whole economic survey, you'll understand government is stressing on domestic consumption now. Domestic consumption. So that point of time, we were talking about private investment and export. Now, primarily, government is talking about domestic consumption. How do I enhance domestic consumption? Okay, so this is what is the change with us. Of course, government is not saying exports are not important, but there is a shift in the sense that government was talking about. Why? Because the global situation is like that right now. So Japan is not okay, US is not okay, global markets are not okay. So directly I can't talk about just maximizing exports. I have to focus on my internal demand right now. So this is what you will find a kind of a shift. That is what I mean by relevance with previous policies of the government. I hope it is clear. Is it? Done. That is about what to do for prelims, what to do for mains. Is that okay? So let's start with our discussion. So this is the topic. This is chapter 10, industry, small and medium matters. This is the topic. Okay, so what are the things which are helpful for the exam? Here, basically this chapter, I will take it as 70% for mains and 30% for prelims. 70-30, okay? And previous UPSC questions which are linked to this chapter, so that we will understand what I have to see in this particular chapter. For example, this was one question: faster economic growth requires increased share of manufacturing sector in GDP, particularly of MSME. Okay, comment on the present policies of the government in this regard. So MSME is one area which is completely discussed in this particular chapter. And MSME is a significant area for the exam. So here, this is one question. Second question, you can see industrial growth rate has lagged behind the overall growth of GDP in the post-reform period. Give reasons. How far the recent changes in the industrial policy are capable of increasing the industrial growth rate? These are not my questions. These are UPSC previous questions. This is to show you that, okay, from this chapter, what are the areas I will focus? So what are the areas I will focus? The role of manufacturing sector, okay, the growth of industry, link between MSME inclusive growth, link between industry and economic growth, PLI scheme. Are you able to get this? Okay, so these are the areas. One district, one product. One district, one product. Okay, so these are the areas. So these are the areas which I will look into when I'm reading this particular chapter. Is that okay? Yes. Of course, this is to just show you that this was a prelims question that was asked earlier. And again, this is again, you should be able to mark this question once you read this chapter. Okay, so this was a previous question. Okay, so this is a basic question with respect to classification of MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprises. Micro, small, and medium enterprises. So this criteria is a wrong criteria. Okay, so 50 crore. Okay, so micro, small, and medium enterprises. Now here all bank loans to MSMEs qualify under priority sector. Yes, MSMEs give loans and MSME loans are part of the priority sector. Okay, but there is a portal called as Udyam portal, which is discussed in the economic survey. That means if you want to avail priority sector lending from banks, you have to register yourself under this portal called as Udyam portal. So that becomes important. That is the discussion here. Okay, but yes, MSMEs, when we talk about MSMEs, are they under priority sector lending? Yes. Is this clear? Okay, so this is the prelims question here. Okay. Clear till there? Okay. So what is the key focus in this chapter? What are the things which we are going to look into? What are the things? One is the performance of industry. So how do you know the performance of industry? One is through indices like index of industrial production. Okay, and there is a discussion of purchaser managers index, etc. That is also there. But of course, I have not put it in the slide. That is also discussed in this particular chapter. Okay, so IIP, how is it performing? So what is IIP? It's a volume index. So whether the volume is increasing, decreasing, etc., that is an indication. How specific sectors are performing. So for example, he talks about cement, steel, electronic industry, coal, okay, textile. Okay, so I picked up few which I felt important. That is like cement, what are the issues? Steel, what are the issues? Textiles, what are the issues, etc. So that is what is the discussion here. Then importance of MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprises. That is what is discussed. And this you will find in the growth chapter also. In the growth chapter also, there is a discussion with respect to why MSMEs are important and what are the problems in this MSME, what has to be done with respect to MSME, etc. Now, there's another area which you will find here. How can India become part of global value chain? How can India become part of global value chain? Okay, so these are the areas which have to be looked into in this chapter. He discusses, the whole chapter can be summarized into these areas. Okay, so when I say global value chain, being part of global value chain, what does it mean? Raw materials from one country, technology from another country. Okay, she's right. So what the whole logic is, for example, in your current affairs also, I think this chapter is there, this topic is there. So when we talk about Apple, probably R&D of Apple is done in California, but assembling portion is done in China. Okay, so China is participating in the global value chain. But what about India? India's participation in the global value chain is limited. So the whole logic is, how can India become part of the global value chain? How can, see, becoming part of global value chain does not mean you have to perform all the functions. Maybe you're not performing the R&D function. You're performing assembling function. Maybe you're supplying batteries. Okay, so you're only part of a certain entity, but still you're part of the value chain. So that is very important if you want to create more jobs and if you want to increase the exports of India or you want to build India's manufacturing sector. Now, one more important observation, if you see the success of PLI scheme in India. Okay, so the success of PLI scheme, why PLI is successful? Anybody? Okay, so subsidies are provided to manufacturing industry. Is it that other countries are not providing subsidy? For example, when we talk about Turkey, Turkey is also providing subsidies. Okay, or even Mexico provides subsidies. Okay, so then why is it that the manufacturers are looking at India and coming and producing in India? Stable government. Okay. Cheap labor. Okay. So, yeah, cheap labor. In fact, we want employment opportunities to be created, and that is the reason we are giving them subsidies. Okay. And geographically, Mexico is more closer to the European and the US markets. If they produce in Mexico, they will reach these markets more easily than producing in India. But one distinctive factor for India is, if you produce in India, you have a readily available market. That means I'm producing in India, already India itself has a market. Okay, so I produce in India, though geographically we don't have the advantage of being close to the US or the European markets, because when you produce here, these companies want to export. They don't come, for example, Apple is coming to India. It's not that they will not export, right? So, but why are they coming to India is that advantage which we have, that is the domestic market. So there is a readily available market in India. Once I produce, there's a huge market. And therefore, this geographical barrier which we have been able to convince the companies so that they will come to India and produce in India. Are able to get this. So PLI scheme, of course, it's a success, but the problem in PLI is also that India should become a manufacturing hub rather than an assembling hub. So we are more into assembling rather than manufacturing. So that is also one more issue. So I think it is clear. Okay. So now the first observation here. Okay, so when I use the word industry, okay, so here you can see, when I use the word industry, of course, the economic survey here puts mining also in industry. You can make an observation here. You can see industry has what all components? You have manufacturing, mining and quarrying. So that means economic survey sometimes puts mining in the primary sector. Okay, and sometimes in the secondary sector. Are you able to get this? So here you will observe mining and quarrying is pushed by the economic survey in the industry component here, mining and quarrying, and then electricity, gas, and other utilities and construction. You can see 4 components in industry. Okay, so that is first observation. So industry consists of 4 components. Sometimes you will find this mining and quarrying, mining as part of the, sometimes. Okay. Now, here, one more observation here. So if I see this chart, if you see this chart, what is the observation you can make? So first observation which you can make is 2020. So this is the impact of COVID. Okay, but still 2020, the contribution of manufacturing to the total GVA at constant prices. Okay, so contribution of manufacturing to total GVA is how much? Around 17.3%. That is what is the observation. Now now again, if you observe 2024, this is 2024. That is, if you observe this 23-24 here. Okay, so contribution of manufacturing to GDP is again around how much? 17.3%. Okay, so in between, if you make an observation, 18, 16, and around 17. Now that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Around last 5 years, though manufacturing is growing, there is muted manufacturing. Muted manufacturing means there is no significant increase with respect to contribution of manufacturing to GDP. Can I say that? Contribution of manufacturing to GDP lies around 17% only, 17.3%. If I take the data of 20 or maybe 2024, this is first observation which I can make. Is that okay? Contribution of manufacturing to GDP. Now, this is the problem not only today, this is a problem from 1990s. For example, if you have seen that industrial growth rate was lagging even after economic reforms. That was the main question. So industrial growth rate was lagging even after economic reforms because that point of time also manufacturing contribution to GDP was around 14 to 15%. And after 1990s till date, if you observe, it is around 15-16% or around 17% of GDP. This is called as stagnation in manufacturing. My manufacturing contribution to the total GVA is stagnant. Of course, economic survey says growth-wise we are doing well. Okay, so growth, this is not growth, this is contribution to GVA. Okay, overall industry contribution to GVA is how much? Around 30.9%. Overall industry contribution to GDP is around 30.9%. This is the data which I need. And manufacturing contribution is around 17% or 17.3%. Can I say this? Are you able to observe? Okay, so this is one important observation which you can make from this particular chart. The sector which is responsible for the growth of industry, the sector which is always performing well and contributing to the growth of industry is the construction sector. Construction sector. So construction sector, if I make an observation here, okay, so here if you make an observation here, the blue one you can see here, this is the construction sector. And construction is one of the most important aspect which contributes to growth. Now this chart, if you observe, annual growth of industry and its components at constant prices. This is contribution to GDP. This is, what is this? This is the growth. This is the growth, percentage growth, right? So here, if you make an observation, of course, 2020 and 2021, there was a problem, obviously, with respect to growth. Okay, so, and you observe the sectors going negative here, one, mining and quarrying, and then you have manufacturing. Manufacturing also, you can see it's going below zero there. Okay, so you can make an observation. This is COVID impact. This is COVID impact. This is Russian war impact. Russian war impact. So war impact also, you observe that my manufacturing is gone down here. I'm making an observation here. So now overall industry's growth rate is how much here? 9.5. This I can use in answer. So industry is growing at a rate of 9.5%. Is that okay? 9.5, contribution around 17%, growth around 9.5%. Now, which entity is responsible for higher growth of industry? You observe that this is the construction. And construction is also one sector which is contributing to maximum employment. That means growth of employment. Growth of employment in industry. Growth is not different from total employment. Growth in employment in industry is also happening because of which sector? Manufacturing sector. But most of the construction jobs are informal jobs. This is also one more challenge. So construction is one of the major entities that is contributing to the growth in the industry. And construction sector is responsible for growth in employment as well. But most of the jobs that get created in the construction sector are primarily informal jobs, and these without social security. So this is also a problem with respect to employment aspect when I talk about my secondary sector. This is one more conclusion from the graph. Are you able to get this? Is that okay till there, right? Now, one more observation here. Mining is one such sector which is most of the time negative. Make an observation here. Here it is negative, here it is negative. Now, one more thing is here the industry growth is 12%, and this is not real growth. This is because of the base effect. This is because of the base effect. So you don't think that industry in 2022, 12%. This is because of the base effect. Because the previous year, you find the growth is so bad that this growth looks really good. And here also, primarily, it is coming from the construction growth. But of course, economic survey says manufacturing growing well, 9. I'll also write that way. But if I closely observe, this is because of base effect. Okay. And primarily, which entity is contributing? Construction. Construction is contributing. Most of the time here, you observe mining and quarrying going negative. Okay. And now currently, yes, you observe that there is a growth with respect to my manufacturing also. So my manufacturing is also doing well. The orange one, you can see manufacturing is also doing well. So overall industry is growing at 9.5. These are the conclusions from this chart. I hope it is clear. Okay, so now here you can see, this is the industrial growth rate at constant prices. Industrial growth rate at constant prices. So you can make an observation here, 23, 24, 9.5%, 9.5. COVID impact minus 0.4, and therefore next year base effect, that is 12.2. Now, industry growth was continuously increasing since last 5 years. The statement is wrong. Continuously decreasing in last 5 years, that statement is also wrong. Manufacturing contribution to GDP has been continuously increasing since last 5 years. That also cannot be commented. Manufacturing contribution to GDP is continuously increasing in the last 5 years. That cannot be commented. There also you'll find 18, and then again you landed up with 17.3, which is same as around what was in the 2020. Are you able to get this? So manufacturing contribution to GDP. Okay, but currently industrial growth rate, is it pretty decent? Yes. Growth rate has increased from last year? Yes. From 2.1 to almost like 9.5. It's a decent level of growth, and economic survey takes credit for this growth, and it says it is because of our policies related to MSME, production linked incentives, one district, one product, XYZ. Is that okay? So that is how it is. I don't have anything against government. I said, of course, see, economic survey document is something like, it is a reflection. It is a reflection of what we have achieved and what we are going to achieve. Okay, so this is what we have achieved and what are we going to achieve. So that means for way forward and policy suggestions, I'll be using some content which is given in the economic survey. Okay, and many times what will happen is whatever you mention in the economic survey may not be implemented because the global dynamics are continuously changing currently. Global dynamics itself is continuously changing. You can't expect that. So suppose government says I'll increase my exports, but suddenly there is a problem. You have war, you have other problems, and therefore automatically you cannot. So this is something which you should understand. Just because it is there in survey, that does not mean the next budget again the same thing will be reflected. Okay, so now here you can see some data. So industrial growth accelerated recently due to construction and manufacturing. So these were the two entities which has led to the growth in the recent past. Manufacturing accounts for 50% of inter-industry consumption and supply. And supply almost 50% of inputs used in all productive activities. Now, this is a line which is given in the economic survey. This is not there in the material. Okay, so this shows that what is the meaning of this? This is something like manufacturing accounts for 50% of inter-industry consumption. So what is this inter-industry consumption? So different industries consume among themselves. Different industries consume among themselves. Different entities consume among themselves. That means whatever this factory is producing can be consumed by the other factory. Whatever this factory produces can be sold to this factory. For example, this factory has produced some maybe rubber or maybe tires, and it has sold to Maruti, and Maruti is using this rubber or whatever it is. Okay, and then this particular factory, again, whatever is produced is sold to this factory. That means whatever you produce, it is also consumed because of inter-industry consumption. So inter-industry consumption is also one of the important aspect for demand for manufacturing products. Demand for manufacturing. So relations between industries also is there because of inter-industry consumption. Okay, so inter-industry consumption itself accounts for 50%. So here you can see manufacturing accounts for 50% of inter-industry consumption and supply. That means services can also be rendered. So one is for inter-industry, that means when they are coordinating, these factories are coordinating among themselves, there can be services which are rendered by others. Okay, so there can be, for example, the car design would have been done by somebody. Okay, so maybe TCS is designing. So designing a car is a service that is rendered. Are you able to get this? Chartered accountant services are also services rendered. So that means whenever there is inter-industry consumption of goods and services, there will be goods also and services also. But 50% out of it is goods, primarily manufacturing. That means the relationship between different firms is there because of manufacturing. That is what he wants to tell. That is the importance of manufacturing. Similarly, he says almost 50% of inputs used in all productive activities. That is, productive activity means you have primary sector, secondary and tertiary sector. So when we talk about the 50% of inputs used in all productive activities, whether the primary sector, so primary sector also you can use tractors, you can use machines in the primary sector as well. So secondary sector also can use machines, goods, etc. Even services industry. So here what is the meaning is, out of almost 50% of the inputs used by whether primary, secondary or tertiary belongs to manufacturing items. He is talking about the importance of manufacturing, whether it is primary, secondary or tertiary. Major chunk you use is manufacturing goods. Inter-industry consumption also 50% is manufacturing goods. Inter-industry consumption 50% is manufacturing goods, not services. Not services. It is manufacturing. And different sectors, what they consume also, primarily it is manufacturing goods. This is the importance of, it's trying to establish the importance of manufacturing. It will not come as a prelims question. I will use it in mains probably, importance of manufacturing. So inter-industry consumption, around 50% of inter-industry consumption is primarily manufacturing goods. That is what. Okay, so that is what he's saying. Okay, now see here, despite pandemic and consequent impairment of manufacturing value chains, the manufacturing sector achieved an annual rate of 5.2% in the last decade. Now, this is a data point which is there in our economic survey. So in spite of so many problems, supply chain constraints, COVID impact, global supply chain problems, still 5.2% is the annual growth in the last decade, last 10 years. So this is a data point, 5.2. So 9.5 industry growth, contribution of manufacturing to total output around 17%. This is what we have observed. Inter-industry consumption around 50%. And items consumed by different sectors like primary, secondary, and tertiary, 50% is again manufacturing related goods. This is what the data talks about. I hope it is okay till here. Is that okay till there? Okay. So here one important background. See, here economic survey talks about why in India there was a problem with respect to an abrupt shift from primary to tertiary. So economic survey says generally an economy should move from primary to secondary. Economy should move from primary to secondary. And then the economy should run in the secondary sector for a certain period, and then there should be contribution of tertiary sector. Unlike India, so the survey also says, where we find a jump with respect to jump from primary to tertiary sector, neglecting the secondary sector. What are the reasons for this jump? The economic survey also talks about several problems. What could be the reasons? One reason which it talks about is infrastructure. Two issues related to logistics inefficiency. Logistics inefficiency. For logistics, you are talking about national logistics policy, etc. We'll talk about this in the infrastructure. National logistics policy, etc. Right? Okay, so infrastructure, we are talking about NIP, NMP, PM Gati Shakti, NIP, NMP, all that. National monetization pipeline. Okay, so I'll talk about these in the infrastructure discussion today. Okay, so then it talks about issues with respect to taxing. High tax rates, inefficient taxing system, etc. in India. Issues with respect to laws like labor laws, etc. This is about regulatory mechanisms in the country. Regulatory mechanisms in the country. Regulatory issues, regulatory inefficiency. Okay, so that is also discussed. Problems in manufacturing like inverted duty structure. Problems in manufacturing, inverted duty structure. So inverted duty structure, what is inverted duty structure? Okay, so when we are importing raw materials, so raw material, you can import raw materials or finished goods, both. Okay, so generally importing raw material should be cheaper for me if I have to produce more within the country, as simple as that. When I'm importing raw materials, if I'm able to import raw materials at lesser price, I will be able to produce more within the country. But in India, the situation of taxing was such that importing raw materials was more difficult than importing finished goods. This is called as inverted duty structure. The regular duty structure should have been promoting import of raw materials rather than finished goods. So importing car is more easier, let's say, in terms of the taxing system than importing the raw materials for producing a car. Then automatically what will happen? Are you able to get this? you're more interested in importing the finished good rather than importing the raw materials which will help you to produce the product. So producing or manufacturing within the country becomes challenging because of inverted duty structure. That is what is called as inverted duty structures. Is that okay? Yes. And we could also see issues related to negative protection in manufacturing. Negative protection. Negative protection is also related to taxing system. So negative protection means if a company is producing product in India, it used to pay excise duty. Okay. Excise is on manufacturing before GST. So producing something in India, you're paying excise. But when you're importing something, there are duties like customs and CVDs, countervailing duties. Okay, so countervailing duties. So India's case, the problem was our excise duties, many times excise duty was far more than the countervailing duties. Excise duty was far more than the countervailing duty. What will happen? You're demotivating those companies which are producing products within the country. Demotivating those companies which are producing products in India. I think it is clear, right? Okay, so you're demotivating them and you're promoting, protectionism means promoting domestic market against the foreign. But negative protection means you're promoting the foreign fellow at the cost of the domestic market. So that is what is negative protection. This is reverse. So that is also seen as a problem. So with respect to taxing, so one is inverted duty structures in manufacturing or negative protection also discouraged manufacturing. Okay, then tax rates, high tax rates, inefficient taxing system, issues of infrastructure, logistics, that means whether it is packaging costs in India, transportation issues in India, high transportation costs, high packaging costs, lack of warehouses, cold storage facilities, all these are problems in my logistics and did not encourage. Infrastructure is also a problem from the beginning, and therefore maximum investments were not moving into my manufacturing sector, rather they were jumping into the tertiary sector. Okay, so there is an abrupt shift. So this abrupt shift has created some problems in the Indian economy. What is the problem in the Indian economy? India could not maximize on its manufacturing exports. So when India was not able to maximize on its manufacturing exports, it had a negative impact on current account deficits. We could not maximize on, we could not become efficient in manufacturing, we could not maximize on. So then too, we failed in terms of creating jobs in the manufacturing sector. This has affected the occupational transition. What I mean by occupational transition, I should have shifted the labor from primary to secondary sector. But I could not shift the labor. Labor was stuck with the primary. That means labor productivity got affected. Disguised unemployment. So disguised unemployment means marginal productivity of labor is 0. So labor productivity is getting affected means you will have low labor productivity. Therefore, low labor productivity, therefore high incremental capital output ratios. High incremental capital output ratio. So capital output ratio, amount of capital I require to produce one additional unit. That is how much of additional capital I need to produce one additional unit of output. That is what is ICOR. Higher ICOR means lower efficiency. So our manufacturing inefficiency, because of that, we had higher ICORs, and higher ICOR was also affecting my GDP growth. This is the effect on Indian economy. Neglecting secondary sector, don't think GDP did not get affected. GDP growth also got affected to some extent. Inclusive growth also got affected because job creation was a challenge. More people could not be, occupational transition was an issue. People are stuck with the primary sector. Productivity has come down, disguised unemployment has increased, etc. India could not maximize on its exports, manufacturing exports. This has led to higher trade deficits and higher current account deficit, higher trade deficit, higher current account deficit. Now, the problem here is muted manufacturing. Muted manufacturing. Because of this, what has happened? Manufacturing contribution to GDP remained standstill. This is called as muted manufacturing, right? Though we focused on MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprises, most of the MSMEs ended up as dwarfs. Dwarf MSME. So dwarf MSME, they were in the market for more than 10 years, but they don't have even 100 permanent jobs. So ultimately, again, we impact on unemployment problem in India. So efficiency-wise, there is a trouble. Employment-wise, employment means inclusive growth, employment and poverty. Occupational transition of economy, there is a problem. That means we could not shift labor from primary to secondary sector. Okay, so, and that is also an issue. Then external sector balance, there is a problem. External sector, these are all side headings. Huh? External sector balance is a problem because trade deficit, current account deficits also got affected. I think I think this should be sufficient. Like labor laws, other things are also there, but I think till here, there should not be any problem. So therefore, you observe that there was a jump from the primary to tertiary sector. Clear? Yes. Can I push this off? Okay. Clear till there, right? Okay. Now, in the economic survey, after he talks about industry and growth of industry, yeah. What? Dwarf MS. See, dwarf MSME are, okay. See, dwarf MSME is that MSME. Okay, so here, government policies were focusing on MSMEs from the beginning. Anyway, I'll talk about MSME in detail, we'll come. So, but why were we focusing on MSME from the beginning? Because one, our industrial policy 1956 itself says promote cottage industries, promote small scale sectors, etc. Reducing concentration of wealth. So government started giving all the concessions to MSMEs. What kind of concessions? Low excise duties. Okay, for government project, government was procuring raw materials also primarily from MSMEs, etc. So these are called as incentives given to MSME. So the expectation is when MSMEs are given some incentive, MSMEs should be able to create more jobs. Of course, economic services, MSMEs are labor intensive, no doubt about it. MSMEs are labor intensive. So that means with little investment, I can create more jobs. That is labor intensive. But at the same time, the negative aspect is you have taken a lot of resources from the government, but you did not create as many permanent jobs as expected, permanent jobs in manufacturing as expected. Reason being, MSMEs remained small. MSMEs did not become big. See, once you take incentives and you start producing, within a span of 5 to 10 years, you should become bigger. So after 10 years of existence, there was a data that was collected comparing MSMEs of US and MSMEs of India. And US MSMEs were 70 times bigger than Indian MSME. This is the data point from previous, I think 2 years back economic survey, which compares India's MSME with US MSME. And after 10 years period, after the incentives have been taken, US MSMEs are 70 times bigger than Indian MSME. What does it mean? That means Indian MSME remained small only. They'll remain small and they'll take incentives. They want to stay as MSME. Be like MSME, take the benefit. Becoming big is not easy. Okay, so many times fear also comes up. So because incentives will not be there. Okay, becoming big and controlling bigger industry is not so easy. And they remained small, taking all the benefits. And after 10 years of existence also, they don't even have 100 permanent jobs, permanent, not contract, 100 permanent jobs in that particular MSME. MSME is there for 10 years, taking all the benefits, and still it does not have 100 permanent jobs. Such a kind of MSME, we call it as dwarf MSME. This we can write in problems or challenges of manufacturing. Or if this question is asked, why manufacturing failed in creating jobs? Suppose this is the question. Why manufacturing has failed to create jobs? So what can be the points which you can think of? What do you think are the reasons for manufacturing failing in terms of creating adequate jobs in Indian economy? Suppose I ask you that way. So are there any specific points you can think of? Okay, so one, stringent labor laws, very good. Stringent labor laws. Two, capital intensive growth model rather than labor intensive. Example, second 5-year plan. Is that okay? Three, failure of MSME. Failure of MSME, that under that, taking all the resources, not becoming bigger, that is about dwarf MSME. So failed in terms of creating adequate jobs, etc. Then informalization of manufacturing industry. That means you failed in terms of creating more formal jobs. You ended up in the informal sector itself. So more maximum chunk is in the informal sector. Therefore, you cannot create adequate formal jobs, obviously. What else? Abrupt shift, impact of globalization over tertiarization of Indian economy. That is also a reason. Over tertiarization of Indian economy is also a reason. That means this over tertiarizing. Muted manufacturing. Example, contribution of manufacturing to GDP being around 17%. Okay. Next, construction being the major driver of employment rather than manufacturing, which creates more stable jobs. This is how you have to pick up points from the economic survey. That is what we have discussed. No? Construction being the major contributor rather than manufacturing. But 12 5-year plan's target was manufacturing will drive my economy. Manufacturing will create additional jobs in the next 10 years, 100 million jobs by 2022-23. This was our target, which we kept in the 12th 5-year plan. Did we reach? Obviously, no. And then we have come up with Make in India. Got the point? Separate ministry on skill development. You're talking about Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana or Mudra loans, credit guarantee schemes for MSME. All that you're doing, but did we create the jobs which we have targeted in the 12th 5-year plan in manufacturing? No. Over tertiarization is also a reason. Is that okay? Understood. So if there's a specific question on employment also, I need 7 points. On growth, it is easy. Specifically, if he's asking why manufacturing failed in terms of creating adequate jobs as expected, suppose, in that line also I need some 6 or 7 points. If it's a 10 marker, I need 9 to 10 side headings. You always have to keep that in mind. Oh, 10 marker, at least 10 side headings. If I practice that, probably 8 will come. 10 side headings, intro, conclusion. Okay. So we're not reading economic survey for enjoyment. Economic survey, I felt I did not find it so interesting also this time. Few chapters were good, but not all chapters. So nowadays economic survey is also getting repeated. Okay, so you have to be able to pick up points. When you're reading that material also, pick up points, like which sector is important, which area is important, where will questions come. Very commercial attitude. Very commercial attitude. Okay, so one reading would be casual read. If you want, you read. Okay, so that is for knowledge. You like first few chapters anyhow you should know, no? GVA, contribution, GDP, first 2 chapters, very important. State of Indian economy. Then taxing, fiscal. But later on, it is like where question will come, which I will use, where can I use in my mains. I'll view the economic survey from this context in the second reading. Got the point, right? Okay, so you may say, no, sir, knowledge. Yes, knowledge, okay. Fine, fine. See, this is about economic surveys talking about some problems in different sectors. And I don't think specifically they should be asking cement or something, but yes, if at all he asks, then probably you will be able to write something. Okay, so here you can see importance of key sectors, and here you find one cement. So some data from the survey only, from your material, from our survey only. 11% of the total input cost of construction is coming from cement. Okay, so that is one data point. Delicensing of cement industry done in 1991. Delicensing of cement industry, 1991. Okay. Okay, so India is the second largest producer after China. Okay, so these are given in your objective questions. And we know that. We can, without reading economic survey also, we know this fact. Okay. So then location, if you see, location, 85% are located in these states: Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, MP, UP, West Bengal. Okay, so this is the data. I need not dig deep into that discussion of cement. There are 4 or 5 pages, 2 pages in the economic survey completely on that. I don't require all that. Okay, so 85% in few. That means concentration of cement industries in specific states is one observation. Okay, so Another observation here is low per capita consumption of cement. So when I talk about global average, it is 540 kg per capita. India, it is around 260 kg per capita. So this is, when I talk about per capita consumption, it is less. Then globally also cement industries contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so they are contributing to around 7% globally to greenhouse gas emissions. So these are the challenges. So one is cement industry, India second largest producer, 85% concentration in few states. Okay, 11% of the total input cost of construction is primarily coming from cement. Okay, so this is the data point. Now, problems are low per capita consumption to greenhouse gas emissions. That's all. That mapping should be clear. And then installed capacity, production capacity utilization. One observation here is installed capacity around 622 million tons installed capacity as of now, and capacity utilization has increased around 65%. So capacity utilization has increased around 65%. That is what is the data. This also is not so required. Just for information, I put it. Like capacity utilization around 65%, it is good. Okay, I should know just the basic details of the cement industry. I hope it is clear, right? UPSC, if it asks specific questions, that is what is the difficult area. Anytime something is specific means it is difficult. Suppose asking what are the problems and challenges in the steel industry. Okay, so generally you don't find. You will find overall industry-based questions. But if he is specifically asking problems in steel or what are the issues in the steel, generally that kind of questioning is not there. You observe the question papers. But if it is asked, then probably I should be able to pull out side headings. That is what you will remember, right? Okay, now here you can see production increased, consumption. This is production and consumption. You observe highest level of production and consumption can be seen in the financial year 2024. That is one observation from the economic survey. Okay, and net exporter of finished steel. Past decade, India became a net exporter of finished steel. This data point, this I can use in prelims. Supposing India is a net importer of finished steel. No, India has become a net exporter of finished steel. This is the observation. Okay, so what are the main problems with respect to steel industry is, one main problem is fluctuations with respect to the global market. Global market, there is fluctuation. Fluctuation with respect to what? Prices. Fluctuation with respect to prices. Okay, two, high energy intensity. High energy intensity, this is basically 2.5 tons of CO2 per ton of crude steel. Okay, so 2.5 tons of CO2 emission per ton of crude steel production. This is some data but globally it is 1.9 ton, but India's case we are talking about 2.5 ton of CO2 emission. Is that okay? So this is the negative aspect here. So it is contributing to 12% of India's greenhouse gas emissions. See, one thing you'll remember, whether it is cement, whether it is steel, one point would be impact on environment in mains. That is a point. That side heading is there. Okay, so whether it is cement, whether it is steel, that is a common side heading which is there. Okay, so if I remember some data, probably 12% of India's greenhouse gas emissions are coming from steel. Okay, and another problem for the steel sector is fluctuations in the global market. Fluctuations of prices in the global market. Okay, high energy intensity around 2.5 tons. Okay, so compared to global. Is that okay? Yes. Not so interesting, right? But still. These are sectors and not so interesting. But still, we have to. Okay, so another one is pharma. You can see here. Okay. Pharma, see here. Pharmacy of the world in generic drugs. India accounts for 20% of global generic drug exports by volume produced. Okay, so this is one. So WTO, in classes we discuss TRIPS. Okay, so, and there we talk about drugs. And especially, you know, that 1970s Patents Amendment Act. okay, was amended by the time of 2005. But still, India focuses on generic drugs. Okay, so here you can see India accounts for 20% of global generic drug exports by volume. Okay, so 8 out of the top 20 global generic companies are based in India. Okay, and high quality compliance. So this is basically what are the things which you observe is India is exporting, one of the exporter of generic drugs, number one. Number two, 8 of the top 20 global generic companies are based in India. Okay, so this is also a data point there. And quality compliance wise, Indian companies are able to get approvals. So this is one more observation here. Okay, and you can see turnover, export and import of pharma sector in India. So you observe that there is an increase with respect to turnover. Turnover is sales, export also. Okay, so this is one observation here. Okay. Okay, so now need to enhance and reimagine pharma R&D. So R&D expenditure in drugs and pharma sector in India averaged around 5% of the sales turnover in 2020 and 21. Okay, so that, see, pharma industry requires a lot of spending on research and development. So here we are talking about pharmaceutical industry, how much of its total revenue is it spending on research and development. Okay, so here two types of entities are there. One is an innovator, another one is a generic producer. Obviously, India will be a generic producer rather than a innovator, right? Because we don't spend so much of money on research and development, as simple as that. Okay, so the report Indian Pharmaceutical Sector System of Innovation, so it talks about joint research among industry, reducing the rigidity of communication between knowledge-based institutions, increasing the channels of funding from venture capital and angel industry. So that is what should be done to strengthen Indian pharmaceutical sector. So probably I should talk about one area is innovation and funding from venture capital and angel investors, better knowledge sharing among government bodies, governments measure to promote R&D, research and development. Okay, so these are some of the aspects which have to be focused on. Okay, so then you can see Atmanirbhar Bharat pursuit here. Okay, so here we talk about Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Pariyojana. You can see here to make quality generic medicines available at affordable prices to all. And you have almost like 12,500 PM Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Kendras being opened. Okay, so this is some data to talk about the relevance of generic drugs. Okay, and challenges and outlook. Dependency on imports for many antibiotic APIs, etc. Pharmacy industry is expected to reach 130 billion by 2030. So this is a data here. Pharmacy industry is expected to reach $130 billion by 2030. Okay, and skill development, R&D, etc. Okay, so all these are or investments from angel investors, venture capitalists. These are the requirements for pharmaceutical industry. So this is okay. Don't worry to see, but we can't neglect because the chapter is talking about these things. We can't say we'll leave these. Okay, so when we talk about textiles as such, so India's observation here, if you see in 1960s, we neglected labor-intensive manufacturing and textiles like sectors, and we over-focused on heavy industry and capital good industries. This is also one of the reason for capital-intensive growth rather than labor-intensive growth. This is one observation. Therefore, obviously, there is an importance of textile sector because it is labor-intensive. It creates employment for many. Okay, so this is something which is the observation. Okay, so India is the world's second largest clothing manufacturer and one of the top 5 exporting nations. So I was also recently researching yarn, which are the companies in India which have the ability to export more yarn. So I was just looking at which companies' profits in textile will go up in the next 1 year because of collapse of Bangladesh. Okay, so Bangladesh, that means in every crisis there will be some opportunity. Okay, so for India, of course, I'm not saying Bangladesh crisis is good, but what I'm trying to say is Bangladesh isn't problem, but textile industry probably can look for opportunities and grab some market Okay, grab some market. So because these companies cannot function. So during this period of Muhammad Yunus itself, so probably Indian textile industry should be expanding its exports and global markets. It has to tap the global market. So this is an opportunity which is there right now. Okay, so here you can see industry context and challenges. Now, what are the problems? Recently also there was one article in Indian Express which says Indian government imposed huge import duties on raw materials imported by the textile industry. Okay. And on one side, if you say Atmanirbhar Bharat and you're imposing duties, the problem here was because of those high tariff lines by the Indian government, the local textile companies had to procure from Indian industries, Indian big industries. And because of that, their cost has increased by 3 times. Because you are procuring from Indian industry. You did not leave them free. Based on certain reasons and logic, you have increased the duties on textile. So the raw materials they could not import, because of which the cost of production increased for them and they were not able to sell their textile products. And these small scale sectors and textiles were making losses. In this background, there was a discussion in the newspaper that government should not interfere in the policies where you are increasing the taxes, especially with respect to textiles, textile imports, textile raw material imports. Okay, so see that many a times government policies will benefit also. Benefit in the sense here you are not promoting the small scale sector. Small sector is getting affected and you're trying to promote the bigger industry. The bigger industry is selling those raw materials and you are buying at a higher price because you don't have an option to get it from outside because of the duties and restrictions of the government. And that was increasing the cost of, and textile sector was making losses. So this was one discussion that was there in the newspaper. I think, is this clear? So government should come up with policies which are pro to small scale units, textile units. This is one thing. Efficiency and economies of scale from large scale modern manufacturing are limited in the textile sector, as MSMEs accounts for 80% of textile and apparel production capacity. So first problem in textile is most of the industries, most of the entities in the textile sector are MSME. MSME, smaller entities will have lower economies of scale. You know what is economies of scale, right? Okay, so when you're a big industry, when you produce something in bulk, your cost per unit will be less, because of which your cost of production will be less, because of which your marginal cost will be less. Fixed cost, variable cost. Okay. Raw materials, labor costs are all part of variable cost. Okay. If a company is big and if it is procuring raw materials in bulk, which cost will be less? Variable cost will be less. Because if its variable cost is less, its marginal cost will also be, you know what is marginal cost, not? Okay, so marginal cost is the additional cost incurred for producing one additional unit. First unit you are producing, second, third, this is fixed cost, you have variable cost. Most of the time the fixed cost is almost fixed. Variable cost keeps varying. It can vary based on what? Taxes of the government, tax policies, raw material cost. Tax policy means recently what did government do? Restricted imports from outside. Then what will happen? The raw material procurement cost for the small textile units increase 3 times. Means, let's say this becomes 40 rupees. Just an example. So the marginal cost for producing this third unit will become 20. Here it is only 10. Are you able to get this? This minus this. Are you able to get this? Okay, so if your marginal costs are increasing, what will happen? Your profitability, two things will happen. One, profitability will reduce. Why? Because you will not be able to compete with bigger industries. And globally, big industries have higher economies of scale. Higher economies of scale, lower marginal costs. Lower marginal costs, better prices. Better prices, grab global markets. Already textile sector is in unorganized and MSMEs are the major entities. So automatically your economies of scale is less and your costing will be high. So this is one big problem. Okay, and then two, we had huge competition from countries like Bangladesh. Okay, so actually India should have grabbed the market, but it is not India. We had competition from other countries like Vietnam, primarily Bangladesh, is good with respect to textile. Okay, so there. So raw material sourced predominantly from Maharashtra, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, while spinning capacities are concentrated in the southern states. This will also increase the costs. Are you able to get this? So this is also a problem. This is also a trouble. Fragmented nature of Indian apparel sector. So first side heading, lack of economies of scale. Okay, lack of economies of scale, as most of the 80% of textile industries are MSMEs. This is the first point. Second, fragmented nature of the sector. Fragmented nature means raw materials you're procuring from somewhere and the spinning activity is happening somewhere else. So you're not concentrating your spinning activity where, that means you're locationally not closer to that place where the raw material is available. As simple as that. Is that okay? Then other challenges, heavy dependence on imported machinery, except in spinning segment, inadequate availability of skilled manpower, technology, etc. See, these are problems for every question. When we don't know anything in the exam, remember, these are problems. That's very important. Because many times we are stuck. So what to write? Technology related problems, will it be there? Yes, economies of scale problem, will it be there? It will be there. Okay, so these are some things which you are going to write if you don't know anything also. Okay, so Niti Ayog's recommendations, okay, and then priorities, creating world-class textile infrastructure, technological upgradation, sustainability, quality standards, etc. Okay, now here there are some measures. One is PLI scheme worth 10,683 crores over 5 years for man-made fiber, apparel, and then National Technical Textile. What are technical textiles? Stain resistant. Okay. So they have a specific purpose. For example, when you're talking about the seat belts in the car, seat covers, okay, they have a functionality, specific functionality. Okay, so this mission, National Technical Textile Mission, to focus on increasing the use of technical textiles. So there's a huge demand that is increasing for technical textiles now. So through this mission, government is talking about focusing on National Technical Mission. National Technical Textiles. So textiles for a specific functional benefit. Specific functional benefit. That means other sectors also use this. There's an expansion of other sectors. Suppose a firefighters. Okay, so there's a separate fabric you wear, or maybe the seat covers, seat belt. So these are all expanding industries now with a specific purpose. Now this is the focus basically. National Handloom Development Program approved for 2022 to 26 to establish 96 small handloom clusters. So specific question, difficulty, here one, National Technical Textiles Mission, Handloom Development Program, PLI scheme with respect to textiles. What are the problems? Economies of scale, unorganized sector, fragmentation here. Okay, issues related to technology, imported machinery, inadequate availability of skilled labor, etc. You can't say specific question, I will leave and come. You can't leave, you have to write. India is the world's second largest clothing manufacturer and one of the top 5 exporting nations. You're right. Is it okay? This will be uploaded. Don't worry. Is this okay till then? Yes. Now, the economic survey also talks about how industry we did well. So it primarily talks about one district, one product, PLI, and it has given excessive focus on MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprise. So these are the 3 areas which it has stressed importance. Okay, so here PLI scheme, that is, it talks about what did government do. Over 1.28 lakh crore investment was reported until May 2024. This shows the success of PLI. Okay, production sales of 10.8 lakh crore, employment generation around 8.5 lakh. Okay, so this is all data. Employment generation around 8.5 lakh, and export it has boosted by 4 lakh crore. Okay, so that means PLI, is it successful? Yes, it is successful according to government books. It is successful also. it is successful. Of course, the negative aspect can be, of course, there's always positive and negative. There are some negatives, but definitely PLI is enhancing our manufacturing capability. Okay, so no doubt about it. Okay, here you can see 1.2 lakh crore investment was reported until May 2024. That's an achievement. Okay. Now this is an economic surveys. This is from our material only. MSME's role, and here the data is very important for exam. Okay, so micro, small and medium enterprises, why are they important? One, why are they important? They contribute to almost 30% of GDP. Of course, it has reduced from last year. If you look into the data of last year, so if you see 2022-23, it was contributing more. It has reduced a little, so it is contributing to 30% of GDP. Okay. Number two, it contributes to 45% of exports. Is that okay? Number three, 60% of MSMEs have a rural setup. That is, they have 60% of the MSMEs have been set up in the rural areas. That means they have a rural base. 20% of MSMEs have women owners. This is all gender when we're talking about inclusiveness. Okay. MSMEs help in tribal upliftment. MSME is a labor-intensive sector. Labor-intensive. So MSMEs are labor-intensive. What is the meaning of labor-intensive? With less investment, I'm able to produce more. Okay, so that is what is labor-intensive. So when I say labor-intensive, with less investment, I'm able to produce more. With 20% investment, you can produce 80% of jobs. That is what is labor intensive sector. I hope it is clear, right? So here some observation here. Share of MSMEs in India's manufacturing output around 35%. You take it as 30. This is 2022. Okay, so it is 30%. Now you remember 30. Share of export, remember, around 45%. Reduced a little. Okay, 45%. Okay, now government initiatives. So MSMEs have different benefits. This chart. So MSMEs have different benefits. One, labor intensive, it creates jobs. That means it increases income, increases consumption. That is one benefit. Okay. Second benefit, it helps in better transition of Indian economy. What is the meaning of better transition? MSMEs will create more jobs, so people can be shifted, labor can be shifted from the primary to secondary sector. This can be done because of MSME. MSME contributes to 45% of exports, as we have talked about already. So that means MSMEs help in external sector balance. If something is contributing to 45% of exports, means it helps in external sector balance. External sector balance means you're talking about current account deficits. Okay, is that okay? Yes, then MSMEs promote labor intensive exports. See, MSMEs are labor intensive, obviously. If your MSME exports are increasing, you'll be able to create more jobs. So there was a question in UPSC mains, why India failed in terms of maximizing labor intensive exports, okay, rather than capital intensive exports. There was a previous mains question. So probably one solution there is, obviously you have to focus on two things. One, labor intensive services like tourism. Two, focusing on micro, small and medium enterprises. Okay, so because they promote labor intensive exports. Another important aspect, MSMEs help in increasing labor productivity. So why? Labor is shifted. That means disguised unemployment is going to reduce. Disguised unemployment is reducing means, what is disguised unemployment? Marginal productivity of labor is almost zero. So when you're shifting labor, labor is becoming productive. When labor becomes productive, lower ICORs, higher GDP. Is that okay? Yes. And then MSMEs help in promoting brand India. So it was also observed that MSMEs also have a social benefit. So what are the social benefit? One, tribal upliftment, reduction of poverty, reduction of rural urban migration. So this is a social benefit. So MSMEs not only have, So MSMEs with respect to growth. Okay, so one, labor intensive growth. Okay, then external sector balance. Okay, so the data points from there is it is contributing to 45% of exports. MSMEs are contributing to. Okay, so this is data point 2024. Okay, and then MSMEs contribute to 30% of my total output. 30% of total output. That means MSMEs play a role with respect to economic growth or GDP. Two things here. One, how will it contribute to growth? One, because it contributes to 30%, number one. Number two, occupational transition means MSMEs help in increasing labor productivity. Labor productivity means lower ICOR. Lower ICOR means higher growth. Growth is equal to savings multiplied by 1 by ICOR. You know this, right? Economic growth is equal to savings multiplied by 1 by ICOR. What model is this? This can also be written as investment multiplied by 1 by ICOR. Harrod-Domer. Okay. Harrod-Domer. It's all about the first 5-year plan is based on this model only, Harrod-Domer. Okay, first 5-year plan. Inverse growth is inversely related to ICOR, directly related to investments. Okay, so with less investment, I can create more jobs. That is 20% investment, 80% jobs. Okay, so this is about labor productivity. So all this is we are writing about growth. So with respect to inclusive growth, jobs, poverty, okay, rural-urban migration would be reduced. Okay, tribal development, because tribal hamlets, okay, so they were producing indigenous product and they were exporting it to other countries. MSMEs help in strengthening my supply chain management. That means they will act as, they will become part of my backward integration of supplying raw materials to the bigger industry. That means it will strengthen my supply chain. It will help in establishing brand India. Because MSMEs are contributing to max 45% of exports. Then if they are efficient, obviously it will help in establishing brand India. Okay, so that is also one more important observation. Then MSMEs, occupational transition, we have already written. Inclusive growth helps in inclusive growth. Okay, so strengthening supply chain is also an important point, because better supply chain, better growth prospect. Better supply chain, better growth prospects. I think it is clear, right? So social aspect, poverty, gender, 20% of MSMEs are women owners, 60% of MSMEs have rural base. Is that okay? Employment generation is also linked to, okay, so, and then tribal upliftment, tribal development, reduction of inequalities, etc. So all these are aspects other than the growth which you look at. Okay, so this should be sufficient. Now we'll go to this data which the economic survey talks about. See here, few things with the economic survey. So government initiatives of MSME. Okay, so this is important because few things we have already written in notes, you know. Okay, so now you have to update that material with this aspect. Okay, so one is Champions Portal. This is for grievance redressal. Champions Portal is primarily for grievance redressal mechanism. Okay, and two, here you can see Udyam registration portal launched in 2020 for formalizing MSME. See, what are the problems of MSME? So these should be addressing the problems of MSME. Can you tell me what are the issues of MSME? One issue of MSME is raising credit. Okay, raising credit. Second problem is most of the MSMEs are in informal sector. I'm just scribbling it out. So formalization is a challenge. So Udyam portal will solve this problem. Okay, Udyam portal will solve this problem. And if you make an observation here, credit guarantee scheme will solve the credit problem. Credit guarantee scheme, they have a challenge. MSMEs cannot issue shares. If they issue shares, you will not buy. That means raising capital is a challenge. When they go to the banks, banks may not give them loan unless and until there's a security that is kept. So that security or backup is given by certain schemes of the government. And for that, SIDBI is also helping, Small Industries Development Bank of India, right? So that is also there. So here for info, then what are the other problems? Low economies of scale, okay? Then insolvency issues. Insolvency means generally, according to IBC, probably the small scale sectors, within 90 days, you should complete everything. Regularly, it is what, 180 plus another 90, 270. Now you're talking about 330 days, right? But startups and small scale sectors, you have to complete it in a very, very short span. But there were instances where 7 years also, they were not resolved for MSME. So this is also a problem for micro, small and medium enterprises. Availability of skilled labor is also an issue. Availability of skilled labor. So informalization, availability of skilled labor, issues of insolvency, okay, and then credit related issues, etc. Okay, then grievance redressal, if there is an issue here, you can see here, Samadhan portal, okay, to resolve issues related to delayed payment. That means delayed payment is also a problem. MSMEs are not cash rich. If the payments are not coming on time, their cash is blocked, they will struggle. So delayed payment is also a problem for MSME, and that basically you're trying to address it through these portals like Samadhan portal. And any problems related to grievances, etc., you're trying to handle it through the Champions portal. Are you able to get this? Faster resolution is through Champions portal. Now, Udyam registration, see, if you want to get the MSMEs get the benefits of PSL, Priority Sector Lending Target, but you have to register yourself in this Udyam registration portal. So that means unregistered in the informal sector, you will be denied benefit of raising credit at PSL rates from the bank. And if you want eligibility of subsidies also, so government is trying to push MSMEs to register themselves. So take GST, register yourself under these kind of portals. So this is one important aspect, very important aspect. So Udyam portal, 4.6 crore MSMEs are registered, and it's a huge number, okay? Now, Union budget allocated 9,000 crores to Credit Guarantee Fund Trust of MSME. This is very important. What is this Credit Guarantee Fund Trust? This is supported by SIDBI. So Credit Guarantee Fund is, banks have to give loan. With what guarantee the bank will give loan? There should be some guarantee based on which bank will give loan. And that guarantee is provided through this Credit Guarantee Fund Trust. Okay, and in combination with SIDBI, along with the Ministry of Micro Small, you have SIDBI. In combination, both of them are helping out. And 23-24 budget, you have 9,000 crore allotted to this. Is that okay? Understood? Okay, then credit schemes, Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program facilitated assistance to so many micro units. Okay, so then credit guarantee scheme here, elevate the credit constraints faced by MSMEs by offering collateral-free loans up to 5 crores. Collateral-free loans up to 5 crores, which is again administered. Collateral-free means how? It is administered by Credit Guarantee Fund Trust. Just like that, bank will not give. Collateral-free means, okay, take. What is the guarantee? The guarantee is this Credit Guarantee Fund Trust. These are important in way forward policies taken by government. So once you know the problems, for which problem, what has been done. Okay, so one PSL targets to handle credit, okay, and that means MSMEs. And then you should know credit guarantee scheme, and then you should know credit guarantee fund trust for MSMEs in coordination with SIDBI. That will give a guarantee. Okay, so that is one more thing. Udyam registration portal, Champions portal, grievance redressal, Samadhan portal for delayed payment. So problems, then solutions. See, one more problem for MSME is COVID has put a lot of trouble for MSME. Okay, and then digitalization is also a problem for MSME. They can't build brands because they are not in the social media. So brands are built in the social media. Okay, brands can be built only if you are good in digitalization. But if you are bad in digital transactions or digitalization, then you can't build a brand. So there is a problem. So skill development programs, especially talking about these kind of aspects, is also very important. So challenges, of course, okay. I hope it is clear, right? So this is about MSME, which says, and government is very confident that they'll do well with respect to MSME. It's already 1.5 hours. Okay, other chapters are small, no issue. Break? No, break after this. Huh? After 5 minutes. Okay, see, one district, one product. Now, first time you have this program in the economic survey. And we have talked about this program in the food processing class. You remember? Okay, so food processing industry. Okay. Now here aim to identify brand and promote the unique strength of each district through a single iconic product produced in that district. So this is the whole logic of one district, one product, right? Okay, and progress identified more than 1,000 products from 761 districts across the country. And government is promoting it through two initiatives. One is you have Sampark to facilitate collaboration between center and the local sellers and revive indigenous industry. So this is one you'll remember. That is ODOP Sampark, one district, one product, Sampark program, collaboration between center and the local sellers. This is one thing which you have to remember. Second thing, PM Ekta malls to link the artisans and the consumers. There they can display their products and they can sell. So this is about PM Ekta malls. Okay, so some success stories are mentioned here. Pack sheds and irrigation arteries resulted in a 20% surge in production of apples in Kashmir. Okay, so this is basically some success stories. So you can see, you can later on go through this. This is also important. One district, one product. It can come up as a prelims question as well. Okay. Take a break now. Then we'll start. 10 minutes, is it okay? Let's start. So the next topic is medium-term outlook, a growth vision for New India. I think most of you wouldn't have seen this chapter also. You've checked it? No. Yeah, so two things here. Where will I use as far as mains is concerned? So this is a very important topic, but though the topic is small, it's a very important topic. Why? Because it is related to economic growth. Okay, so it talks about several aspects like focus of government, or when we talk about Amrit Kal, what is the focus? Okay, Viksit Bharat 2047. 2047. India will be a developed country. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Good if India becomes a developed country by 2047. But here, what we should observe is there are few things where we focus, and there are some problems also. We'll see both. Okay. So in UPSC mains, where do we find questions related to growth? This is a chart which shows how UPSC mains questions are asked. Okay, so for example, savings is an important factor for growth. What are the other things other than savings that are important for economic growth? 2018. Foreign investment is a critical factor for growth. What are the other things like, or over dependence on foreign investment can become even more critical? Previous year question. Okay. Can market economies become inclusive? Do you think market economies need to become inclusive? What is the role of financial inclusion in enhancing economic growth? Last year. Role of financial inclusion in enhancing economic growth. That means keeping economic growth at center. It can be either financial inclusion, it can be either savings, it can be either capital formation or investment. Investment or capital formation are linked. Capital intensive and labor intensive exports. Remember that? Okay, so that was one. The role of infrastructure in enhancing economic growth. One year there was a question on potential GDP. Potential GDP. Okay, so what is potential GDP? Okay, what are the factors that will affect potential GDP? This was the question. Okay, then do you think India faces jobless growth? Okay, so this was also a question, previous mains, not my question. Okay, so jobless growth, do you think India faces jobless growth? Do you agree? This is how the question was framed. Okay, so keeping growth at the center, see how many questions was framed. 3 years back, the question was on V-shaped and K-shaped economy. That is also growth, V and K, previous UPSC question. Okay, so and startups not asked. Startups impact on economic growth, not asked. Just I was thinking, I felt that's also important. Role of manufacturing sector with respect to economic growth. Okay, so MSME economic growth already we discussed. That is also already asked. The role of manufacturing, specifically MSMEs, to increase economic growth of the country. This was the question. Okay, and then labor productivity and economic growth. This was also asked. Okay, so what is that labor productivity? Come up with a growth model where you increase economic growth without compromising on labor productivity. 2019 15 marker. Got the point right? That means growth as a topic, if I learn, I will get one question for sure in mains. That is what is the observation from the previous question. This chart shows why this topic is important. Why growth as such? See, you will find mobilization of resources in your syllabus. Mobilization of resources. This chapter talks about mobilizing resources from external sources might become difficult for India. Why? Because of the global scenario currently. So currently, probably maybe you cannot expect more ECBs moving into India because of maybe war situation, other problems across the globe. Okay, you cannot expect more FDI investors. For example, US market right now, the US is in recession. Japan has increased the interest rate, so probably investors may move out of India. So I cannot depend more on foreign investment. Is there a scope for mobilizing resources through internal means? That is what is important. Through internal means, how do I mobilize resources? That is, our savings in bank is one source. Government tax revenues, which will increase the tax to GDP of the government, that is another source. So these are all what internal sources of mobilization of resources. This is what the chapter talks about. Are you able to understand? Okay, so you should be able to link it to the previous year question papers. Okay, so now after understanding that, after seeing that chart, I know what I should see in the chapter. As simple as that. Very clear what I should be seeing in the chapter, right? Now here you can see there is a brief background. This is from our material only. So this talks about India's growth. So India was facing Hindu rate of growth, which is low levels of growth, less than 3.5%. We crossed Hindu rate of growth by the time of 1996. So 8th 5-year plan, that is 1992 to 97, we were able to cross Hindu rate of growth. And we were able to cross Hindu rate of growth because of the growth in the services sector. Growth in the services sector. And more foreign investment was also moving into the services sector. Okay, so this is few observations here. Now, it says India's economy has grown significantly since 1990s, 1993. And India aims to become a developed nation by 2047. That is what we're talking about, Viksit Bharat. But at the same time, we have grown to such an extent in spite of lot of problems and challenges, including COVID. That is what the topic talks about. So there are issues like geopolitical conflict, climate change, etc. Okay, so that is also a discussion. India's growth and prosperity are amidst these challenges, in spite of there being so many challenges, are grow. See, IMF says India this year will grow at a rate of 7%. We are very confident that we will grow. Last year, we have grown at a rate of 8.2%. Okay. Okay, so yes. Okay, so now here, India's key focus in the short term. This is a crux, then we'll go into the different areas. So Madam also was saying when the budget was announced, many were unhappy with respect to budget, especially with respect to taxation. So one was the real estate taxation, like the indexation benefits. Another one was the long-term capital gains tax being increased to 12.5. Short-term capital gains increased to 20%. So employee section was not happy. But when they've asked Madam was saying, my primary focus right now, as far as my budget is concerned, is to come up with, put all the asset classes under uniform taxing. You know, what she was trying to say is, all the asset classes under single tax mechanism. That means what? Long-term capital gains for real estate, it is 20%. I will bring it to 12. Okay, around 12, 12.5. I'm going to bring it down to, but I will remove the indexation, she was saying. Of course, that there are problems by removing indexation. That's a different thing. Now there are discussions going on. To long-term capital gains tax on financial markets like equity also is around 12.5. She made it from 10 to 12.5. So what was her logic is, earlier you were saying all assets are at different rates. Real estate at 20, financial markets at 12.5. So I want to bring everything at a single rate. Of course, that is her logic. Okay, you want so that there will not be any discrepancy with respect to asset classes. So you don't ask me with respect to why I have increased the tax. That is how she was talking about. But later on now, because of opposition, there are other issues that are going on. But primarily, one of the important aspects she was saying, the main agenda she was talking about is employment and productive employment, job creation. So she says the agenda is job creation. Then everybody was questioning also, like job creation is your agenda. That means private players should be having more money because the private player will be creating jobs. So like this, there were a lot of discussions going on. But the budget agenda also, if you see, employment or reducing unemployment was the primary agenda. And that was the main focus which Madam was also talking about. So here also, if you observe, India's key focus in the short to medium term, generating productive employment is one important factor, productive employment. Two, bridging skill gap. 3, tapping the full potential of agriculture. So agriculture cannot be neglected in any growth process. Okay, we have discussed that earlier also. So agriculture is one such sector, though contribution is less to the GDP, it is a backbone of India. Okay, so it cannot be neglected in any growth process. So this is something which we should know, and that is also discussed in this chapter. Then managing green transition. See, green transition, sustainable development, voluntarily reaching the targets, all that is good, but green transition involves cost. It's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. When I say if I have to spend on renewable energies, I have to spend on these renewable energies, it's very costly. So probably it's a trade-off. I have to sacrifice somewhere. So how do I manage both? How do I balance both? Okay, improving the quality of health of India's young population. So here you're talking about human capital. So human capital primarily about education, skill, and health. So these are the key focus areas, short to medium term. This is the observation. Okay, in this chapter, this is where what they focus on. Okay, then here, of course, here economic survey is talking about 6-pronged strategy. Here 6 prongs, but Amritkal basically talks about 7. Okay, so we'll talk about that 7. So here you can see 6-pronged growth strategy for Amritkal, boosting private sector investment. Now this was also there in the economic survey of 2018-19. If I have to recollect, this is the economic survey 2018-19. This is the cover page of economic survey 2018-19. So that is the reason I follow government what it was saying. Is there any continuity with respect to your policy, or where you are going back, which one is moving forward? So if I look at the geared approach of $5 trillion, so government's target was kept in this year 2018-19 that I will reach $5 trillion economy. In 5 years, I'll make India a $5 trillion from 2.7 to 5 nominal GDP, 5 trillion. And here you can see gears. Gears means everything will run together, everything will rotate together, then I will reach 5 trillion. This is what the government was saying. Okay, so here if you make an observation, and she says two important things out of all the gears is investment and two, exports. Investment and exports, and that too private investment. This we have discussed in investment-led growth. So investment-led growth means in my expenditure method of C plus I plus G plus NX. Okay, so Chinese model primarily focuses on I and X. I and X. So in 2018-19, India wanted to be like China. So where we will also focus on two things, private investment and exports. But today you are primarily talking about private investment, but you're not much mentioning something like exports. Got the point? Why? Because global scenario is not so conducive for maximizing exports. Are you able to get this? Okay. So that point of time, what are the things? Savings, jobs, nudges, a slight push to bring favorable policies, exports, data, transparency, law, investment. So all these run together, rotate together. I will reach 5 trillion. Is that okay? Now you can see, madam, here. This is about Saptarishi, 7 priorities. Okay, so 7 priorities currently. So one, green transition is one aspect, right? So here you're talking about green growth. Then you're talking about youth power. So youth power probably again health, skill sets, education, and other aspects. Youth power, okay. Inclusive development. So inclusive growth, inclusive development, another important aspect. Infrastructure and investment, very clear. See, even here also, investment, if private fellow has to make investment, government also has to make investment into infrastructure. So that is clearly visible here, infrastructure and investment. And then financial sector related reforms, and unleashing the potential. That means focusing on different sectors and tapping the potential. Okay, so if you reaching the last mile, it involves even supply chain. Okay, so logistics, many other things. Okay, so this is a 7 priority which you can observe here. Okay, so that point of time, so there is a continuation, investment and infrastructure, it's a continuation. Okay, so here there was no much discussion on environment and sustainable development, but here you are also talking about environment. You are specifically mentioning inclusive development, last and reaching the last mile here. Okay, so this is something which you should understand. Much of discussion was not there with respect to this aspect called as export. So this is 7 priorities, or we call it as Saptarishi. Is that okay? Understood? So now the growth strategy for Amrit Kal here, boosting private sector investment. This is not new. This is already a continuation from the, but how do you do it is what is discussed in the chapter. Second is growth and expansion of India's Mittelstand. See, Mittelstand is in countries like Germany, there were some small and medium enterprises which could withstand any kind of crisis. Okay, which could withstand any kind of crisis means any ups and downs like COVID or any economic situations. They were very firm and they were standing strong for a very long period. And that is how Indian MSMEs should also be. So that is indirectly focusing on my micro, small and medium enterprises. That is the logic here. Okay, and then removing the growth impediments in the agriculture sector. So agriculture sector backbone, you have to work on making agriculture sector more efficient, and then financing of green transition, building state capacity and capability. So state capacity and capability means you're talking about Mission Karma Yogi and all these kind of missions. So this is the outlook. I hope you're able to get this. Okay, so this is a basic understanding. Okay. In the present context, what is the observation? Okay, so India wants to be a developed nation by 2047. This is missing here. Okay, and our GDP around $3.6 trillion. Okay, so what they say is in spite of rupee value depreciating, okay, so we were able to achieve, okay. So what is our rank with respect to GDP calculated at PPP? Third, huh? Yeah. So GDP calculated at PPP rates. Okay, so is that okay? And about nominal? Fifth, right? So the target is you want to be third when we talk about nominal. Okay, so here you can see GDP 3.6 trillion and this is per capita income. This is per capita current dollars, per capita income in dollars. Okay, so GDP. So this is $2,484. Okay, and then what are the current issues? Basically, one, you have problems like COVID. Currently, global dynamics are not okay. If you make an observation, Japan, China, China also there is a trouble. Okay, US almost. So there was a report released in US recently which says there's huge unemployment problem and US is heading towards. Actually, US is in recession. They only say we are heading, but they are already in recession. Actually, 6 months back I've told you in class. I think US is already in recession. They are not telling, and the same thing happened. US is in recession. Okay, so US is already in recession, which we all know, but now some report comes up and then you start feeling like, oh, there is instability in the global market. Okay, so US is already in recession. Japanese banks have increased the interest rates. Capital can move out of India. So foreign investment can move out of India. So Japanese investors may move out of India. That can also create problems. A lot of problems today. Today also Hindenburg report came and they were, the report directly talks about SEBI chairman only. Now this is a very big thing because whether it is, I don't think it is right. I don't know exactly. Nobody knows. But the question is, when such a statement comes up, how will foreign investor looks at India is the question. So tomorrow probably morning, I am also a little worried that everybody, how many of them will suddenly pull off money and go back to their country? And can there be a slump in the market? So all these are not good. Hindenburg is a short selling entity and such kind of reports will reduce credibility. And SEBI has not tweeted still. I just know in the break also I've opened and I was checking, did SEBI come up with any tweet like saying that, no, you are absolutely wrong. So that kind of mention is still not there. Okay, so many global dynamics are changing right now, whether it is Japan, Europe is already in trouble, US is into recession. Okay, so several other problems, etc. And climate change and global warming, this is another major issue. So this particular chapter also looks at things from this context. Okay, so understood, right? So once we have seen the priorities, what is that they are going to do? Let's try to understand. See here, first thing is generating productive employment. So when you try to understand generating productive employment, you can see here, India's working age population, 15 to 59, will grow until 2044, requiring the creation of nearly 78 lakh non-farm jobs annually to meet the demand. Now, this is a very big problem for India. That is the reason Madam is also saying, my focus is going to be on employment. Now, along with this, you have industrialization 4, which can replace some of the formal jobs also. Okay, so robotics and artificial intelligence. So this is the requirement of job creation. So the workforce is estimated at nearly 56 crores, of which more than 45% are employed in agriculture. This we have already discussed. So even now, if you observe, around 45% are stuck with agriculture and only 11.4% are in manufacturing. Now, this is the big challenge. That is, there is a huge requirement of jobs. Now, where is the government going to focus with respect to creating jobs? And you have to create more formal jobs, which cannot be replaced by industrialization 4. And even today, 45% of the population is dependent on primary sector. So where are you going to focus on creating productive employment? Obviously, government is saying manufacturing, but so many years we failed, and you can see 11.4% in manufacturing. So that is one of the big focus area or job at hand for government. So government has to focus. But still, I did not understand, if you want to create so many jobs in manufacturing, you should leave money to the private. Who's creating jobs? It is not government. It is private that is creating jobs. So your policies should be such that there is more money in the hands of private, so that more startups will come up, or more private investments will move, and they will create jobs. Government can never create jobs. Government cannot reach this demand because government has no business to stay in business. This is Madam's statement in previous budgets. So when you're not in business, you cannot create jobs. So more money should be there with the privates. So this was the conflict basically. When you're taking away more money in the form of taxes, then how are we going to create jobs? And how are we going to create so many jobs? This was the question that was asked to the government. Okay, so in the recent past, but of course you will not write all this in the exam. Okay, so this is for understanding only. Now see here, skill gap challenge. 65% of the population is under 35, and many lack the necessary skills for a modern economy. So about 51% of the youth are not yet employable. So this is again a challenge. That means this is a skill deficit, and government has to focus here. So Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship reports that only 2.2% of persons between 15 to 59 have received formal vocational training. So government data itself is clearly saying that only 2.2% of the persons between 15 to 59 years have received formal vocational training. So without what is vocational training? Job-oriented training. Got the point, right? Okay. So challenges in skilling and entrepreneurship are low apprenticeship coverage, limited mobility between skill and higher education programs. So this is basically when you're talking about education, job interface. Okay, so there is a problem, or you call it as industry university interface, right? So that is a big problem in India. So one, productive employment, why it is required? Because the requirement is almost like more than 70 lakh jobs to be created, and we are hardly 11.4% are in the manufacturing. That is, manufacturing is contributing to hardly 11 to 12% of jobs, and that is a big trouble. Skilling, what is the problem? You will remember this data, that is 2.2% of the persons between those ages are only have received vocational training. Okay, so this is one. Then agriculture sector, of course, agriculture, I think you would have discussed in the agriculture class in detail. So agriculture is a huge area, right? So you would have discussed the problems in agriculture. Agriculture is a back-end sector for most of the other sectors. Okay, and agriculture has many problems from marketing to distribution to several aspects, right? So tapping the full potential of India's agriculture faces structural issues affecting economic growth. The main concern is sustaining growth without food price inflation while incentivizing farmers to increase production. What was the growth of agriculture? 2020 ka nahi. What is the growth rate of agriculture? Recent details of growth rate of agriculture. You can use mobile and tell me. $1.4. Good. 3.6. That is COVID year, he's saying. 3.6 is COVID year, when all other sectors won. That is a problem in agriculture, rural demand. So budget also, they were talking about rural demand and agriculture growth. Why? Because it is only 1.4. Yes. Okay, fine. So here you can see easing compliance requirements and financing bottlenecks confronting MSME. So this is again, so Middle India we were talking about. So this is basically focusing on micro, small and medium enterprises. So here we have come up with Mudra Yojana, Credit Guarantee Fund, etc. So managing India's green transition, India faces a significant funding gap for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Are you able to get this? Okay. India aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 33% by 2030 and increase non-fossil fuel-based electricity to 40%. Now, it involves costs. That is what is the discussion here. Okay, so then India-China economic relations are complex, with China dominating global supply chains and affecting India's renewable energy program. So this is also a threat for India. Okay, so this is China dominates in the supply chains, and therefore India relations are getting complicated with China, then we will have trouble here also. India's issues with respect to integrating with global value chain. So now, one, skill development issues, two, Okay, generating productive employment requirement 78. Then full potential of agriculture sector. Okay, and then easing compliance requirements with respect to micro, small, and medium enterprises, and then managing India's green transition. So we were talking about that is what it talks. The economic survey is focusing on these areas only. Okay. Then private investment, how will private player raise more money? If you look into the graphs in the economic survey, it clearly shows that banks credit has increased, and banks credit was primarily for MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprises. This is a good sign. Then how is bigger companies raising money? Economic survey says bigger companies are able to raise money through corporate bonds. Like Adani Green was able to raise money through corporate bonds and share market. And banks credit has increased primarily for micro, small, and medium enterprises. This is a good sign. So here deepening the corporate bond market. So this is something is also a focus, that is investment from various financial options beyond bank financing. And economic survey says the most of the bigger industries were able to raise money through these routes, like the financial market, share market, and the bond market, not depending on banks. And who was depending on banks? Micro, small, and medium enterprises. Okay, tackling inequalities, this is already always a problem. Top 1% accounting to 7% of the total income. So this is also one more important aspect. Why? Because inclusive growth is also there in my Amrit Kal discussions. So if I want to achieve inclusive growth, I have to reduce inequalities. And reducing inequalities, here the data shows India's top 1% is accounting to 7% of total incomes. And government interventions focus on job creation, integration of informal sector, female labor force participation, and tax policies on capital and labor incomes. So this is what the government is talking about. And then improving the quality of health of India's young population. 56% of India's disease burden is due to unhealthy diets. So this is about human capital. Okay, you're talking about health related aspects. Is this clear? Okay, so just observe these points. Employment, skill, agriculture, compliance requirement for MSME, green transition, Chinese with respect to supply chains. Okay. Then expanding the corporate bond market, tackling inequality, improving the quality of health. Is that okay? Yes. So economic survey talks about 6-pronged strategy. Okay. So it talks about 6-pronged strategy for medium-term growth. So what is this 6-pronged strategy for medium-term growth? One is boosting private sector investment. You're talking about PLI, Atmanirbhar Bharat packages. Okay, so PLI and Atmanirbhar Bharat packages. Okay, then expansion of middle stand. This is basically with respect to strengthening my micro, small, and medium enterprises. So how do you do it? Deregulation, reducing the regulation of the government, physical and digital connectivities, physical and digital connectivity, okay, for MSMEs. Why MSMEs are important? Because 30% of GDP contribution and 45% of exports. Anyhow, we have discussed about MSME. So this is about expansion of middle stand. So one, boosting private sector investment, Atmanirbhar Bharat schemes like PLI. Okay, then expansion of middle stand. This is strengthening my micro, small, and medium enterprises. Agriculture sector reforms. So agri sector reforms should be from several quarters. For example, National Food Security Act. Heard of this? Okay. PM Fasal Bima Yojana. That means we are talking about crop insurance, etc. Is that okay? Fasal Bima Yojana. It is for is it for land owning farmers or is it for everybody? No, no, no. Fasal Bima Yojana. Fasal Bima Yojana for everybody. Fasal Bima Yojana. Fasal Bima Yojana is for everybody. Then there is one more scheme. What is that scheme? Which is not for everybody, which is not for tenant farmers. Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. That is not for that is not for everybody. That is only for land holding farmer. Don't get confused. Okay, so that means government is coming up with many schemes. If you trace agriculture, we have discussed earlier. Okay, so then reforms with respect to subsidies like MSPs, etc. That is also discussed in the economic survey. Okay, and food security related aspects and agriculture marketing related reforms, doubling farmers' income, agriculture marketing reforms, APMCs, e-NAMs, e-technology for the aid of farmers. Okay, yes. Then financing of green transition in India. So here we have to use sovereign wealth funds, private equity, okay, depending on multilateral and developmental banks from outside. So it's not that financing means Indian banks will finance. So you have to look into routes. Of course, you know about UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Of course, there you have clean development mechanism, emission trading. But okay, so that was uh, not so effective. Green Climate Fund that was created also. So when you talk about Annex 1 countries' contributions, okay, so that was not so effective. In environment, you would have studied, right? So here, for financing of green transition in India, so how will you do it with sovereign funds to multilateral developmental banks, especially from outside? So suppose, for example, you're talking about NABARD helping listing of uh, talking about social stock exchange and also listing of heard of green bonds. Okay, so heard of green bonds, right? So this is something like you're making a private equity, that is private players focusing on green transition. Okay, so then building state capacity and capability, mission Karma Yogi. Okay, so even the civil services plays an important role with respect to implementation of policies, etc. So this is about building state capacity and capability. Are you able to get this? Then bridging education employment gap. Gap. So here 6:1 private sector investment, expansion of middle stand, bridging education and employment gap, and then financing of green transition, building state capacity and capability, and agriculture related reform. So this is the broad focus. This is the broad focus of how do we achieve middle term growth by using these 6-pronged strategy. So we'll use it anywhere. What has to be done with respect to increasing economic growth or 6-pronged strategy as suggested by the economic survey. Okay, so then automatically we will write these points. Is that okay? Understood? Atmanirbhar Bharat. Ah. Building state capacity and capability, right? So this is from our material only. Okay, so mission Karma Yogi. Holistic approach to building state capacity in India. I think it is very popular. You should have read it. Okay, so launch Mission Karma Yogi to enhance state capacity using the workforce to workplace framework. Okay, so issues in civil services and performance management systems were not equipped with proper mechanisms to assess, reward, and improve performance. So all these areas would be focused. Okay, so this is about the topic. There are extensions to this topic. Later on, you can go and check the slide. Okay, so this is from our material only. These two questions are from the material. Okay, so one is discuss the potential of agriculture in driving inclusive growth and employment generation. So you can, of course, this was given in this topic. You can put it as agriculture straight. Okay, so what is the potential of agriculture in driving inclusive growth and employment generation? Can you give me some bullet points? Of course, this topic talks about only agriculture reforms is one area, but separately agriculture is a separate chapter. But in this chapter, there was this question, discuss the potential of agriculture in driving inclusive growth and employment generation in India. every 1% growth in agriculture is 2 to 3 times more effective in reducing poverty than the same 1% growth in secondary or tertiary sector. Do you remember that? Okay. For every 5% land that is effectively distributed, okay, with proper water and irrigation facilities will reduce poverty by 30%. Okay, so is that okay? Uh, Clear? Okay, so like this you have to think, how do you link agriculture to inclusive growth? Okay, so agriculture, poverty, agriculture, farmers' welfare. Okay, so agriculture and growth and development, etc. Okay, so all that. So this is one. Analyze the factors hindering India's ability to harness this demographic dividend, suggest policy measures to address challenges. This is all about skills, education, health. So these are the areas. So these are some introductions for questions related to growth. See, in exam, I will not think. So I'm very clear. Economic growth question. Either I will start with 8.2% of last year, or IMF is saying growth is 7%. I'm very clear. Or maybe as stated by economic survey. So India is going to achieve this much growth, okay, in another 5 years. So this is how I will write in the exam. It's not like I will think in the exam hall. I'm very clear. Any growth-based question, I will start with data. So that data can be from budget, that data can be from economic survey, or that data can be from current affair. Is that clear? Understood? Okay, so the center now estimates overall growth estimates of 2024 to be 8.2. IMF raises India's growth forecast to 7% for 2025. Is that okay? Now they're saying 6.8 and all that, but it's okay. Okay, so with 6.9% of growth rate in 2022-23, India's world's fastest growing economy, as said by World Bank and termed as bright spot by IMF. These are all introductions. Termed as bright spot by IMF. India was growing when other countries were not doing well. Though there is a Russian war situation, India was growing at a very decent level. Okay, so DGDP, this is of course, this is a growth, this is a basic definition. I hope it is clear. Okay, so such kind of, see, you're reading the chapter, we have to use it somewhere. Okay, so you'll use it somewhere. One, this is important, 6-pronged strategy is important. We can use it in the growth related questions. Okay, remember. 2, this is important, focus areas for medium term growth. What we have discussed, these 7-8 points, these are also important. Okay, so this is about the other areas where there can be questions on growth. Later on, you can go and check. Okay, so this is about, so the chapter talks about how should we raise resources without depending on foreign countries. Why? Because the global situation is not okay. So how are we going to mobilize resources from domestic means? So here, if I say domestic, see here, savings rate as effective tool for economic growth. Okay, so this was already a previous question. Okay, so this is one factor. Savings is one factor for my economic growth. So India should be focusing on this particular aspect. So later on, you'll just go through this slide. Okay, so currently, what is the household saving situation in India? Okay, currently, what is the debt situation of households in India? Are you able to get this? Okay, so debt situation. What is the credit expansion situation in India? Okay, credit expansion. Okay, so this you will go through later. Similarly, the issues and problems with respect to savings. Currently, the debt burden has increased. Or for the banks, though banks' credit growth has increased, banks don't have enough cash with them. Banks don't have enough cash with them. Banks don't have cash with them. This is credit to deposit ratio of banks is almost touch 90%. Is that okay? So this is not linked to economic survey. This is extension to that chapter. Later, I want you all to go and refer. Okay, so this is under the topic mobilization of resources. Important. So the economic survey only says mobilize resources from domestic sources. So how do I mobilize resources from domestic sources? One aspect is Savings. Domestic sources means whose savings? Our savings in the bank. Our savings in the bank. So with respect to our savings, why is it important? What are the present problems? Current problems. Current problems are, one, debt burden for the households has increased, touched almost 40%. So debt burden is one problem. More debt burden means there will be trouble. So more debt burden, more default risk, less credit expansion. Okay, then less credit expansion means less consumption, then it will affect GDP. This is the current situation, current problem. Second problem, cash with the banks is not there. So banks are not in a position to give loans, and that is the reason RBI and SEBI reduced, SEBI made people, it made it difficult for people to push their money into futures and options in the budget. Two reasons. One, you're losing money. Another reason is people are not leaving their money in the bank. They are pushing everything into derivatives. Though they lose it, they're ready to gamble. But the problem is already deposit is not there in the bank. This is also one hidden reason. Not hidden, we know. So one reason is people are losing money. Second reason is deposits, credit to deposit ratio, almost 90%. So no enough cash with the banks. And people are not interested in keeping the money in the bank. They are not interested in stocks. They are interested in derivatives. Put 1 lakh, get 10 lakh. This is the target of people now. People all put 1 lakh, get 10 lakhs. How many days? 1 day. Now this is the target with which they are moving. If I lose 1 lakh, it's okay. It's okay. But 1 lakh becoming 1 lakh 5,000 slowly, we don't want. Now this is the observation since last 1 year. Okay, so all these are some observations you can see later. Other factors for growth, later you will go and see. Other factors for growth, here you will add on few things. What are the few things which are mentioned in the economic survey for growth? Medium-term strategy, just now. Education, industry, interface, health, okay, agriculture-related reforms, middle stand, focusing on micro, small, and medium enterprises. Are you able to get this? So these points have to be added to this chart. This is the previous chart. This chart has to be updated with the medium-term strategies of growth. That has to be added, and that's it. Then I will revise. That's all. Is that clear? We have one more chapter. Okay, so go ahead and check. So if I have to mobilize resources from internal sources, what are the problems which we have? Infrastructure is also there. I will take some extra time, maybe another 8:15. Okay, yes. So what are the problems of mobilizing resources from internal sources, right? So here, what are the sources for the public sector? For the public sector, one is tax source, non-tax sources. Then external sources. This is the problem which the economic survey says. There is going to be a trouble with respect to mobilizing resources from external sources. That is investments and borrowings from outside, etc. So now, where should the government focus? Resource mobilization. So here one problem which we have, tax base is very less. Okay, so this is one problem. You should expand the tax base. Okay, then only you will be able to increase your resources or resource mobilization. To non-taxation of agriculture, of course, this is difficult to implement. So agriculture is still, you still don't have income tax on agriculture. So if I want to raise resources from internal sources, taxing agriculture may be an option. Of course, people will not like it. Okay, inefficient utilization of domestic public resources. Okay, so you're not, this is also one more problem. Financial inclusion, handling tax evasion effectively and tax litigation. Tax evasion, tax litigation, both. So if you're not able to handle tax evasion, then you will not be able to raise revenues. You can't increase your tax to GDP ratio. You can't increase your tax to GDP ratio. Okay, so tax evasion here, base erosion and profit shifting. Now, how will private player raise resources? Angel investors, venture capitalists, and borrowings from financial institutions. Okay, then IPOs, ECBs, etc. Remove ECB, internal sources means How do you do it? IPOs, FPOs should become more efficient. Expansion of corporate bond market in India. Okay, so angel investors, venture capitalists, support of angel investors and venture capitalists, creating a proper environment for angel investors and venture capitalists. Widening the tax base, reducing tax evasion, increasing financial inclusion because the money gets routed to the financial system. Otherwise, more physical savings will increase. So resources will not be mobilized. Financial inclusion means resources will be mobilized into the banking system. Is that okay? You're able to get this? So this is a chart which should help you to understand how to mobilize resources from internal sources. Till here, I think it is okay. Understood? But you have to revise, huh? The other 4 slides you have to revise, and in that growth chart you add on the medium term strategies. That chapter is over. Okay. हाँ, ये तो upload होगा ना आपके? No? Fine. So this is infrastructure lifting potential growth. Okay, so now we have seen economic growth, medium term policies of the government. Then we have talked about industry and then infrastructure. For infrastructure is interlinked with both of them, obviously. Okay, so a basic observation from the previous year's economic survey. So this is one, backstage. Okay, so here you can observe government was giving adequate importance even in the previous year economic surveys with respect to infrastructure. So what was government trying to say? Few things here. This 5 trillion is through this, for which private investment is required. And this private investment, if you want private players to invest, what is the prerequisite for private investment is infrastructure. And this infrastructure primarily has to be done by government and of course PPPs also, public-private partnership. This is what is the observation. Then for which government has come up with some policies which are stressed in this year's economic survey also. One is National Infrastructure Pipeline, which says from 2020 to 2025, government is going to spend 111 lakh crores in this NIP policy. Then National Monetization Pipeline, that is also mentioned in this year's economic survey also. So in that 111 lakh crores, around 6 lakh crores, government will try to raise through monetization pipeline. So government will try to monetize its existing ports, monetize its brownfield projects like existing ports, airports, get the money, build greenfield. Then National Logistics Policy. In government's logistics policy's primary agenda, reducing logistics cost to 8% of GDP by 2030, number one. Then in Logistics Performance Index, it's an index given by World Bank. Logistic Performance Index given by World Bank. By 2030, India wants to come into the first 25 ranks. Okay, then we also have, in the similar line, we have leads. Leads is also an index in the similar line of Logistic Performance Index, which is the Indian index basically, which talks about how different states are performing. So logistics policy of government definition of logistics focuses on 3 things. One, multimodal logistic park. 2, warehouses. 3, cold storage facilities. Is that okay? So logistics, when I say, see, logistics is basically involves several activities from the procurement to the last mile delivery. It involves many activities. Packaging is part of logistics, transportation is also, distribution also. All these are part of logistics. So India's case, we have a lot of logistics related issues. Our packaging costs are high. Our transportation is also skewed. Most of our transportation happens through road. 60% of transport happens through road, and India is also called as truck nation. Truck, road transport. That means rail and inland waterways we have neglected. So there again you have to focus to improve efficiency. After doing all this also, if there is no coordination between the different departments and ministries with respect to implementing programs of infrastructure pipeline, then there will be trouble. That is the reason you have PM Gati Shakti. Okay, so 7 growth engines. PM Gati Shakti, coordinate under a single roof, you put everything, and there should be coordination among everybody, all the ministries and departments, and then you will spend taxpayers' money more efficiently. Otherwise, you'll push the road, then remove the road, again coming up with the cables, and then again you will be. So this is how government operates if there is no coordination. So PM Gati Shakti tries to make taxpayers' money more efficient. This is the background. And this is what is discussed in last year's survey, before last year's survey, and also this year's survey. So they're talking about NIP, NMP, NLP, Gati Shakti. And then they also talk about problems in financing infrastructure. Okay. Now, why is infrastructure very important? 3 things from this chart. Infrastructure will lead to crowding in private investment, first thing. Because this road is there, okay, government has laid this road of 100 crore, then probably the private player is coming up with a factory there. This is called as crowding in investment. Jobs are getting created means income is increasing and poverty is decreasing. This is the impact of infrastructure on inclusiveness. So infrastructure, when I'm building economic infrastructure, it also helps in reducing poverty, increasing incomes, creation of jobs. Is it okay? This is all about inclusiveness. Then because the road is there, because the industries are set up, this also has a positive impact on something like you'll have more schools coming up, hospitals coming up. This is called as positive externality. This helps in building social infrastructure. That means though you're building a physical infrastructure like road, also helps in building social infrastructure. So when you're building social infrastructure, it is also nothing but again inclusiveness or inclusive growth. That means physical infrastructure will also help in inclusive growth. Because of these, it has a positive externality in the form of building social infrastructure like schools or hospitals. And I'm spending 100 rupees, 100 crores on road, probably GDP may increase by 10,000 crores because of all this activity. This is called as multiplier effect. So what is the benefit of infrastructure? Multiplier effect, crowding in private investment, inclusive growth, through creation of jobs, reduction of poverty, positive externalities. These are the benefits of infrastructure. I hope it is clear. Okay, so this is the background of infrastructure. And here, but though infrastructure is so important, we also talk about the problems in the infrastructure. That is, one of the biggest problem in financing infrastructure is banks cannot, or banks should not give too much of loans for infrastructure. Banks are not in a position to give too much of loan for infrastructure. Why? Because of asset liability mismatch. Infrastructure projects have longer gestation period. That means they will give returns over a period of time, and therefore getting returns over a period of time means risk is also on a higher scale. That is also a problem. Then currently again ECB route might get affected. Why? Because of global scenario when you observe today. So ECB route for financing infrastructure might become a challenge in the current scenario also. It became a problem after subprime crisis 2008. And now again the global scenario does not look so great. So ECB route might get weakened. That can also go against infrastructure. PPP was seen as a solution, but after 2011, the bigger PPP projects, private player was not showing interest. And that is the reason Nitin Gadkari also came up with hybrid annuity model, which is a combination of BOT, EPC, etc. So like this, we did everything possible to build roads, but hybrid annuity was primarily used for building highways. roads, okay, national highways. So we want to extend, because there's a huge requirement here. That is what we'll observe. So India's investment in infrastructure was largely funded by public sector. If I take 11th five-year plan data, almost 45% was coming from government's budget. And government does not have so much of resources to fund infrastructure. Government has to look into other alternatives for funding infrastructure. So what are the other alternatives for funding infrastructure? Maybe the bond market should be strengthened. ECB route should be strengthened. What are the other ways? PPPs, public-private partnerships, enhancing PPP route. That is also one more. Then government's policies like NIP, NMP, NLP should be successful. Infrastructure pipeline, 111 lakh crore, etc. Or monetization of government assets should be efficient. Government came up with, about InvITs, real estate investment trusts and investment trusts, InvITs. So popularizing InvITs and REITs to raise money and raise money from existing projects. Units are allotted and you're raising resources from the existing project, and you'll use that money for building new greenfield projects. So all that. So here you can see, okay, so major sectors, road, rail, water, okay, and here India's rank, World Bank Logistic Performance Index, up from 44th in 2014. And then you have discussion on civil aviation and power sector in this chapter. Okay, so here you can see challenges. When I say challenges in infrastructure, there are many challenges. One is issues related to land acquisition is one problem. So if I have to prepare a template for infrastructure, problems and issues of infrastructure. So from one is financing, two gestation periods, okay. Three issues related to land acquisition, etc. Okay. Private players not showing interest in signing bigger PPP. This is basically low private participation, etc. Okay, due to issues related to risk estimation, etc., and several other factors. Okay, and then lack of aggregation of financial flows into infrastructure. So that is basically the money is not flowing into infrastructure. That is what is the meaning. Okay, no single source that gives an inventory of infrastructure projects in the country. And again, there is a problem, that is climate and environmental sustainability. So if I have to prepare a template, one is environment, land and related factors, labor related factors. Labor related factors means what? Skilled labor availability. Then financing issue, asset liability mismatch for banks, IRDA norms for insurance companies, okay, and longer gestation periods, profits are spread across 10 to 20 years. Is that okay? So that is about financing. What are the other issues? Lack of coordination between center and state, okay, and issues with respect to, we call it as what? Stalling of projects. Stalling of project, you start the project. Okay, so according to data, stalling of projects was accounting to almost like 7.5 to 8% of GDP. So once the project gets stalled, the money gets stuck. So infrastructure projects, banks, NPAs were also increasing. So this is the background. I hope. Is that okay? Understood, right? So here, NIP. To implement NIP, you have a project monitoring group. Okay, so to implement NIP efficiently, NIP target 111 lakh crores 2020 to 25, right? To implement NIP, you have a project monitoring group. It is an institutional mechanism for faster resolution of issues and regulatory bottlenecks with a project. So that means investment on projects above 500 crore, there should be a faster mechanism of approvals that will be handled by the project monitoring group. Is that okay? Yes. And then PM Gati Shakti, National Master Plan, and National Logistics Policy, whatever we have talked about. So this is how the government talks about. So enhancing private sector financing. So institutional support from central government, whereas state and local governments can facilitate resource mobilization through pooled financing mechanisms of municipal projects. So strengthening municipal bond market, Pune municipality. Okay, strengthening municipal bond market also, or pooled financing mechanism from the state and the local bodies. Is that okay? Then tax incremental financing and land scales and development rights, etc. Okay. So this is the aspect. Now here you can see with respect to infrastructure financing, What are the problems of infrastructure financing? We have talked about asset liability mismatch is one problem. Okay, ECB route is another problem. Okay, so then IRDA guidelines are there for pension fund companies and primarily for insurance and pension fund companies to invest in infrastructure. That is also an issue. Private players not showing interest in PPP financing. These are all issues, okay, with respect to financing infrastructure. Okay, so now here you can observe growth in government's capital expenditure. So public expenditure push, this is some data from the economic survey. The union government's capital expenditure increased 2.2 times between 21 and 24, whereas state government's expenditure increased by 2 times during the same period. This is about government spending on capital expenditure, that is government spending on building infrastructure. Is that okay? Then primary components of union government, direct spending by various government departments, and then gross budgetary support, which is the financial support provided to central public sector enterprises. So two ways. One is the direct support, then you are helping the public sector units, central public sector enterprises. Okay, so there are two routes here. That is what we are calling it as gross budgetary support. Is that okay? Now observe this chart. Union government's capital expenditure and its support for central public sector enterprises and state governments. It has expanded considerably. Okay, so this is what you can make an observation here. So resources of public enterprises. Okay, so overall you can see 11.3, 12.7 lakh crore, 14.1 lakh crore, and 15.8 lakh crore. You find an incremental graph there with respect to the resources. Okay, state capital spending also you can make an observation here from 4.6 lakh crore 2021 to almost like 9.6 lakh crore budgetary estimates. Is that okay? So that means both center and state are putting in efforts with respect to increasing the capital spending. Is that okay? Yes. Now, what are the other sources of funding? So other sources of funding you can see here. Bank credit to infrastructure from March 23 to 24 was about 79,000 crores, significantly less than the union government's gross budgetary support for railways or roads. Okay, so another source is what? Bank credit. Anyhow, you know that banks, bank credit, but there is a trouble also here, which we have talked about. Then gross inflow of ECB. ECB route is also one route for funding infrastructure. So that is what we have observed here. So you can see rose to $9 billion in 24, up from average of 5 billion. Then debt and equity, infrastructure raise money almost like 1 lakh crore through debt and equity in the capital market. So you're raising money through REITs and InvITs. Are you able to get this? REIT, InvITs. Difficult to concentrate, factual topic, but we can't help. Okay, so FDI equity inflows to infrastructure sector was around 94,000 crores. So these are the sources. Okay, one is budgetary support, state and center. Two, other than government, what are the sources? Bank credit, ECB, then the market. Market is basically you're talking about debt and equity, real estate investment trusts, and InvITs. So FDI equity inflows to infrastructure sector during 2024. This is about the FDI inflow. This shows infrastructure, construction, non-convertible energy, power, sea transport, others. So overall, this is the data which it shows. So what are the different ways? Okay, now this is about, see, what are the measures taken by government to enhance infrastructure? Earlier, you can see here, India Infrastructure Project Development Fund Scheme. India Infrastructure Project Development Fund Scheme, financial support for project development of PPP projects. So what did the government do in the recent past for enhancing infrastructure? So as we have talked about, one, you should be knowing about viability gap funding. Okay, viability gap funding. Up to 40% of project cost, capital cost for PPP projects. This is for economic projects, economic. economic projects. Okay. Then up to 80% of capital cost for social projects. So viability gap funding is like a grant, money that is coming from the government state. Okay, so from the finance ministry. Up to 40% it comes for economic projects for the capital cost, and up to 80% for the social projects. Okay, so this is for the PPP. PPP. Okay. Then takeout financing was one mechanism which earlier government was talking about. So this is to handle the bank. Takeout financing is a mechanism of using your short-term or medium-term deposits. Okay, takeout financing. Okay. Then strengthening credit default swaps. Strengthening credit default swaps. This is to strengthen the banking sector. Strengthen the banking sector. Then these policies of government, what we have discussed, NIP, NMP, National Logistics Policy, and PM Gati Shakti. Then establishing infrastructure debt fund companies. Establishing infrastructure debt fund companies. So infrastructure debt fund companies are your group of companies come together, whether it is like banks, and they will fund bigger infrastructure projects. They will fund bigger infrastructure projects. Okay, so this is infrastructure debt fund companies. Is that okay? Then ECB route, strengthening the ECB route. Then focusing on new models of PPP like hybrid annuity. Okay. Shall I? Okay. Yes. Okay, so here you can see viability gap funding, infrastructure, India Infrastructure Project Development Fund Scheme, monetization pipeline, okay, and these other aspects. So this is more important what we have discussed there. I hope it is clear. Last 10-15 minutes. Some are struggling to sit. Okay. Sunday. No Sunday for UPSC aspirant. Monday you enjoy, no? You have class. Okay. Fine, fine. See here. See, physical connectivity infrastructure. So this, 10 minutes, give me 10 minutes. Okay. So till here, is it clear? Importance of infrastructure, why infrastructure, problems in infrastructure, problems in infrastructure financing. There can be their question can be template with respect to challenges in infrastructure. There can also be challenges in infrastructure financing specifically. Okay. Challenges in infrastructure means land, labor. Are you able to get this? Financing, okay, coordination, center state. This is about problems in infrastructure template. Then template, if you prepare, it is with respect to all these aspects. But if it is only infrastructure financing, then what are the problems? Okay, then what measures have been taken by the government? So these are the measures taken by the government. Then comes specific areas. So specific areas means one, you will read two, one you will read road, two rail, and three problems in the power sector. Okay, so that you have to do. I'll just brief you through the discussion here. See here, road transport here. So one, you have Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. Heard of this program? Okay, so Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, you have here, you can see. So Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana 3 launched in 2019 for consolidation of 1,25,000 kilometers for connecting to agriculture markets, higher secondary schools, and hospitals. Okay, so here when we talk about road, one is Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. Current status, in the last 10 years, national highways have grown 1.6 times. This is data. Okay, so this data you have to remember. Okay, then you have here National Industrial Corridor Program. So government is developing level 11 industrial corridors to offer multimodal connectivity, plug and play infrastructure for future ready sustainable cities. Okay, so then digitization has cut off plaza waiting times by nearly 16 times since 2014. We also know this when we, yes or no? Okay, so digitization has cut toll plaza waiting time by nearly 16 times by since 2014. Okay, so all these are measures. Okay, so later on you'll just go through road. Okay, then see here, Indian Railways capital spending has increased by 77% in the past 5 years. Capital spending has increased by 77% in the 5 years. Okay, and initiatives of railway enhancement, you can see one mission 100% electrification program. So 96.4% of Indian railways have been electrified. Some data here to show some progress. Okay, so then Amrit Bharat Station Scheme, which was launched in 2023 for development of stations continuously. 1,324 stations have been upgraded or modernized. So this is about Amrit Bharat Station Scheme. Heard of it anytime? Okay. So then here you can see Gati Shakti multi-modal cargo terminal being developed by private players on the railway and the non-railway land based on demand from industry and potential of cargo traffic, more cargo traffic. That is private participation. Okay, so this is some achievements with respect to rail. Okay. I want you all to read this later. Energy infrastructure. I think if you remember in the regular classes also, I think we have uploaded some notes related to infrastructure. Checked it? Okay, not the PPT which I showed you just now, but also there was another PPT to separate where you have separately rail, road, port. Okay, many of wouldn't have checked it also. Very good. Okay, so there you will read from there that material you will read rail, road, and all that, and later you just go through this area that is the power sector. Okay, I'll stop here. Any doubts you can ask.